What's up, guys? I'm here with my good friend Amanda Hengst, and we are super excited about today's edition of Real Raw Conversations, a safe place to talk about hard things. Amanda is just got an amazing past, amazing redemption story of just what God has brought her through and where she's at now, and I just can't wait for you to hear the story. So, Amanda, I'm just going to give the floor over to you and let you kind of tell your story, and maybe I'll ask some questions along the way and facilitate some conversation, and it'll be good.
Sounds good. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
We started talking on a leadership group, and we kind of started talking about addictions and coping mechanisms. And on there, I think we kind of started talking about, we got into a little bit of my past and my story. And it all basically starts, I think, with any sort of trauma or any sort of dysfunctional behavior, there's always a root to that dysfunctional behavior. So it's not like someone just starts doing drugs for no reason,
Right.
or someone starts making horrible choices for no reason. There's usually a root behavior or a root area of trauma that started that kind of process. So me as a child, I was raised in a really ultra conservative home. So I was sheltered from a lot of the real world, but in that process, I as a child, I was molested by a neighbor when I was 7 and 8 years old, and then as I got older, there were a couple other instances where I was sexually abused by people from outside, not anything from my family, but people from the outside. So that was like a reoccurring theme throughout my formative years, throughout my childhood. So it really set me up for failure in the future. So just quickly touching on that and fast forwarding to when I was about 20 years old, I moved out to California to go to school. And in that process, I was learning how to be an adult. But I did not realize that I had a lot of trauma kind of underneath that I've never really dealt with. So when life became hard and I had needs that weren't being met by my regular community, I started seeking to fulfill those needs and not so healthy individuals and in not so healthy ways. And then that ended up putting me in a really, really not great position. So, long story short, I ended up being in a situation where my ex-boyfriend was extremely abusive, extremely manipulative and controlling, and ended up sex and labor trafficking me while I was in relationship with him. So just to define that, sex trafficking is any sex act in exchange for something of value through fraud, force, or coercion is the federal law. So a lot of people would say, and I would say, that prostitution is sex trafficking. Because usually individuals who end up in that lifestyle aren't little girls saying, when I grow up, this is what I want to do for a living. They are put into a position in life where there doesn't feel like there's any other choice, or life has reinforced that belief that this is all they're good for. And so a lot of individuals don't have that choice mentally or emotionally and are forced into a situation. Now, I do 100% take ownership of my own choices and dysfunctional choices that played a part in this, but definitely also recognizing that a lot of it was I was victimized by someone who was really horrible and really manipulative and really toxic. So, and then the labor trafficking part was he was actually my boxing coach. So I used to fight professionally, and he would manage all my fights and get all the money from that. And I never saw any of that. So So that's the very short of how I got into all of that.
So how old were you when your life was at its worst, and what would you tell that version of yourself? What would you tell that version of Amanda when life was at their worst? Because I know we have people watching today that may be in a sex trafficking situation, may be stuck in a trap house somewhere, and need some encouragement and need to hear that maybe it can get better. So I'd love to hear you speak into that.
Yeah, when it was probably about 24, 25 when it was the absolute worst. And what got me there was a lot of violation or relinquishing of my own standards. So the standards
Mm,
I did have left, the dreams and the desires I did have left that had not been completely abolished by trauma,
yeah.
I kind of like let those things go, and I recognize that, like, oh, it's okay if I don't get married, like we can still have a family, and I
Yeah.
let that go. Oh, it's okay if I say yes to this, like I guess it's okay. It's not what I normally do, but I guess it's okay.
Yeah.
And this like slow breaking down.
Mm,
So someone who's in that situation right now, like recognize what did you want to be when you were a child?
mm,
Like, what were those dreams that you relinquished? What was that one thing that everyone's like, oh man, when she grows up, she's going to be the
yeah.
president, or she's going to be an
Yeah.
amazing writer and actress or whatever?
Yeah.
Like, what was that dream? And recognizing that you're not too far gone to get
Yeah.
back there.
Yeah.
Um, and that it's just one choice away, because
Yeah.
that situation was only a couple choices, that slippery slope, like I made
Yeah.
a few wrong choices and boom, here I am.
Yeah.
And there's only a few choices out. They're hard choices, they're difficult choices, but to get you out of that lifestyle and into something more
Yeah.
than you could ever imagine, like you deserve it and you are worth it.
Yeah. So would you say that, because, I think it's funny you said that nobody wakes up in the morning and says that, hey, I want to be a prostitute someday. Everybody has hopes and dreams and aspirations. And and I know there's not a number you can put on this, but how many, because I think we need to touch on that breaking down of kind of your morals and your standards. How many bad decisions do you think it takes? And I don't need a number, but to get to a point to where you're just like, whatever happens, I'm just going to go for it. Like maybe addiction happens, maybe,
Yeah.
the drugs take control. I'd love for you to speak into that.
I mean, I would think it's as small as 2 to 3 choices can
Yeah.
get you there
Wow.
if you
Wow.
have a storyline that reinforces those decisions.
Right.
So if you have a whole history of people violating you in a certain way,
Mm,
or let's say you're from a family that is really loose on prescription drugs, and maybe mom was always on something or taking something or trading something, like if
yeah.
you've grown up in that lifestyle, that's going to be not a difficult choice for you to make.
Mm,
Because you're going to be like, well, I'm just going to do it this once, or I'm just going to do it to get me through this rough patch.
yeah.
And there's really easy ways to rationalize it if that's been the story all along.
Yeah.
And even if that hasn't been the story all along, I've worked with women who have had their nursing, they're in a hospital working, they hurt their back,
Mm,
and now they're addicted to opiates, and it
hmm.
was never their choice. It was what the doctor prescribed them.
Yeah.
And so because guilt and shame can jump on people who maybe haven't lived in that community that, is doing these things, like she was from a community that was very like high standards, this is who you are,
Right.
very affluent, very rich. So for her to make one mistake was enough guilt and shame upon her to keep that secret
Mm,
and not seek help and keep
wow.
making bad choices.
Wow. Yeah, and one thing that we always talk about at the Hope Project is we like to talk very often about the difference between guilt and shame.
Hmm.
Guilt tells you you are a bad person, you are a loser, you're never going to get anything right, that's shame. And then guilt tells you you did a bad thing, you need to maybe change, make some better decisions, and we can't let guilt turn into shame, because when guilt turns into shame, that's when we get stuck in the situations we're in. We've got to let guilt encourage us to change. That's what guilt is there for. It's a natural thing your body does to help you to change. And so we can't let it get to shame. And I'm telling you, one way that you can stop it from getting to shame is tell somebody close to you. Just
Hmm.
confess to somebody close to you something you did, somebody that you can trust, that's going to maybe pray with you, walk with you through it. But I'm telling you, it is dangerous. I can tell you from experience, it's dangerous when you let that guilt turn into shame, because now you're a bad person and you can't do anything right, right? The
Hmm.
drugs are all you can do right. The sex is
Hmm.
all you can do right. And so you have to let that guilt turn you into be an action step to say, hey, I need to talk to somebody. Maybe I need to get some counsel. Maybe I need to reach out to the Hope Project and talk to them about something I'm dealing with, because I know they're not going to judge me, because they've probably done it too. And so, man, I think that's great that you hit on that, when that guilt turns into shame, you're in dangerous territory. You're
Yeah,
really in
definitely.
dangerous territory. And so, what advice would you give to anyone who is, maybe in the sex trafficking, labor trafficking world right now, and they just can't, they don't see a way out?
I mean, everyone has to come to that point to where they've had enough. And I know that's true in addiction, and I know that's true in the sex trafficking world, to where they are past being afraid if their pimp's going to beat them, past afraid what people are going to think, past afraid of, okay, what am I going to do without this drug? And
Mm,
they're done. And people come to that spot, and you can always see it in them.
mm,
And once you get to that broken state, there's a broken state that everyone gets to, and hopefully it's not before, an overdose or something
yeah.
like that.
Mm,
And it's a very precarious line, but once they get to that spot, I remember exactly what that felt like. I
mm,
remember exactly that night that I felt it. And it was like the fog had been lifted for just a second. And
mm,
my mind was clear enough to make the right decision. And I was very aware that it was a very small window.
yeah.
And if I didn't make this decision now, that this was probably my last chance. Like, I probably
Wow.
wasn't going to survive. And so yeah, I bought a plane ticket, a one-way plane ticket back
It's
to Florida.
amazing.
I'm from Florida, and
Yeah.
because I recognize that if I don't do this now, I'm never going to do it
Yeah.
again. So I need
Yeah.
to get out right now while my mind is clear.
Hmm.
And I know we all have those moments of like clarity, and
Yeah.
I've worked with people long enough in this area to see that go across their eyes, and I'm like, oh, there it is. Like, we
Yeah.
have to act on it right now. We have to go to detox right now.
Yep.
We have to make that decision right now. Come with me right now. We're doing this. We
Yeah.
can do this.
So good.
And then inviting people in at that point and from that point forward,
Yep.
because you can't do it on your own. You can't.
Yeah.
There's no way. You have to let those people in that can help you, because you're not going to be strong enough.
Yeah.
You've created this habit for however long. You can't just break it in a moment.
Yeah.
You can start to break it in a moment, but you're going to need services. You're going to need counseling. You're going to need therapy. You're going to
Yeah.
need medication potentially,
Yeah.
to help you through that time.
Yeah. So I think it's really, really interesting that you mentioned that moment of clarity, and it's kind of like a window, and I kind of see it like as a space where your head
Yeah.
goes down below it or up above it. Again, you're out of it. You're back in that fog, and maybe you're watching this tonight, and you're like, man, everything she's saying is making sense, and I want help. I want to get out of this. Man, reach out to us. We've got people that will, wherever you're at, we will come to you. We'll extract you out of a bad situation. What's one thing we do is domestic violence situations. We'll come and help you get out. I'm 6'3" and 280 pounds. I will come to your house with the police. But that's what we're here for. That's what our organization is here for, is when you do reach that moment of clarity and you're ready to reach out to someone, we are a safe place that's not going to judge you. We're going to walk with you. We're going to come to you. We're going to offer you whatever resources we can. And so if you're feeling that moment of clarity right now as you hear Amanda speaking, I want you to reach out to us. Reach out to us through Facebook or YouTube or hello at thehopeproject.cc email. Completely confidential. We won't call the police. We just want to walk with you and work with you through whatever it is that you're going through. And so, can you speak to the fact that oftentimes the sex trafficking and labor trafficking go hand in hand with drug and alcohol addiction?
Oh, definitely. So my experience was that since I was fighting professionally, drugs were never offered to me. It wasn't even an option because I'd get blood tested regularly.
Right.
However, alcohol is another story completely. So by the time I got back to Florida and was trying to piece my life back together, I have serious amounts of PTSD.
Yeah.
I'm a rageaholic. I have depression, anxiety, and even prior to that, in the midst of living that every single day, there was that as well.
Yeah.
And so alcohol was the only way to kind of like
Escape.
calm the storm for a minute.
Yeah.
And it was really comforting. But I recognized, coming out of it, that that's not a lifestyle I want. And I was just, when I would drink, it would I wouldn't be the best version of me. I wouldn't have as much control, obviously. So it wasn't a lifestyle that I wanted to continue to perpetuate because my abuser was an alcoholic.
Yeah.
So I didn't want to be anything like him. Why would I want to
Yeah.
be anything like him? So that's what really gave me the ability to kind of walk away from it. And even now, 6 years later, now as a professional, like that's still something that I have to just always have in the back of my mind of, okay, what's my intention with this drink? Am I drinking because I'm stressed? Because that's not healthy.
Right.
Am I drinking to celebrate, like having this one glass of champagne? Yeah, that's like a positive thing.
Right.
So, and for some people, they have to go completely cold turkey, and I respect that and hear that. For me, that looked a little bit different.
Yeah.
But I do keep a really tight hold on it because there is that inclination to still be like, oh, I'm stressed, I'm having a bad day, I want to drink.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, what do you really want?
Yeah.
What you really want is peace.
Yeah.
What you really want is fulfillment and joy. So let's search out things that are actually going to give you that instead of put a Band-Aid over something.
Yeah, yeah. So what is it that you do to kind of give you joy today? Tell us about that.
That probably looks like running, honestly.
Yeah, okay.
Like, I hate and love it, but when I'm stressed because I now work in anti-sex trafficking for children, and I work in the foster care system. So I've had a lot of awesome experiences where I've been able to work with police and educate them on what sex trafficking looks like and how to work with victims. And I've been able to write legislation, and it's just been a night and day. So
how awesome it is that you get to give back, and maybe hopefully save some of the people that are going through what you were going through. And I just can't applaud you enough for using your pain to turn it into something that you can help people and love people and save people. And it gives me so much joy to know the great work that you're doing, and I'm just couldn't be more proud of you.
Well, thanks.
Yeah.
That's that's how I win, right?
Yeah.
Because it's a really bad situation, and not like if you look at it for what it is, like being raped however many times a day, my body being punched however many times a weekend, being beaten, like the living daylights beat out of me every single weekend. How do you redeem that? And like only the craziest person in the world could redeem that is God and His grace. And so now I've been through enough therapy to where I'm clear, I'm good, I can talk about it, and it doesn't trigger me at all.
Yeah.
And it serves me. So like we were talking earlier, I'm like, joke's on him because he has no idea that he created this awesome advocate for the people that he's hurting.
Yep.
And like, I hope one day he encounters Holy Spirit and finds, wholeness in and of himself because again, people don't wake up as abusers.
Yep.
He was abused throughout his entire childhood too. I know all about it. And so I hope he encounters the Lord. I hope he encounters grace. And that's like truly how I feel in my heart now, that I've experienced the grace of God and that I'm on the other side living life to the fullest and walking in this new identity because it's really important because a lot of people get stuck in that victimhood. And that's a really crazy place to be. It's like it's like another destructive cycle of bad things happen to me, so bad things will keep happening to me because that's my life. Bad things happen to me. And getting out of becoming a victim and then moving to a survivor, for like recognizing, okay, like I'm past being a victim. No one's hurting me anymore, but maybe me. So addressing those issues and then moving from survivor to a leader. And so that process is difficult, and it's a hard process. Like I remember the process of leaving behind being a survivor and changing into a leader and recognizing that I can be okay and it doesn't make what he did okay.
Right.
And it seems so simple, but that was a really difficult thing because I felt like I had to be broken for the rest of my life in order for me to show that what happened was wrong.
Yeah, and one thing we always say Because I've got some past. I was sexually abused by a youth counselor at a church growing up, and I've got some of that same kind of trauma. And one thing that I really feel like that God has showed me from healing from that is that victims rarely ever walk in victory.
Mm,
I'm not a victim of my circumstances anymore. I'm an overcomer,
yep.
and now I can help people that maybe are in that victim mentality and just need some healing to know that they can be an overcomer and they can in turn help other people
Yep.
in that victim mentality. And so, tell us a little bit about how God and like Jesus played a part in your story.
Yeah, he was always present in my life because I was raised Christian.
Yeah.
So he was always present in my life. But one way that I think the church back in the 90s kind of failed
Right.
was they didn't teach people how to have bad days. And they
Mm.
didn't teach people how to handle depression or anxiety because it wasn't something we talked about yet
Yep.
as a society.
Yep.
So I think there was a lot of condemnation on people who struggled with that stuff. And there was like, well, let's pray it out and let's like,
Yeah.
you don't
Let's
have enough
church it
faith.
out. Let's God it
Yeah.
out. Yeah.
And for a legitimate, diagnosis, there is no pray it out.
Yep.
It's like, no, you probably go and need to get your hormone panel checked
Yeah.
so that we can just, figure out how to supplement correctly so you're feeling good, or maybe
Right.
we should change your diet, yada yada yada. So I think like back then it was like the perfect storm because the church really failed me in that moment
Yeah.
by not being the support I needed.
Yeah.
And now moving forward, like we always had a dialogue. I was always talking to him even in the midst of my like lowest
Hmm.
disgustingness point.
Yeah.
He was very present, and I always recognized that. And so like coming out of it, that I still had a lot of hurt towards the church, but I wasn't really mad
Yeah.
at God. There was a point where I'm like, feels like you're using me like every other guy in my life.
Mm.
So like, let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Let's wrestle that out. And he wrestled. I have a journal like just full of that time, and
Wow.
him and I just wrestled it out to where I'm like, I don't like you today, and he'd be like, it's okay, you can still come and enjoy
Come
worship. Like
on.
it's not a big deal. Like, still
So
come
good.
partake of my presence and get, like, I want you to take advantage of me, was
Yeah.
basically God's conversation to me. And I was like, this is weird. Like, okay. So he just kind of, like, wooed me basically
Mm.
back into relationship with
He's so
him. And
sweet, isn't he?
yeah, he's a good guy.
I think it's really wise for you because it took me a long time to decipher the difference between church hurt and the love of God. Because I think
Mhm.
oftentimes, and I know there are people watching today that are mad at God because of something that church people did. And what
Yeah.
we have to remember is that those are just a bunch of imperfect people trying to follow a perfect Savior. And rarely do they get it right,
Mhm.
because we're all imperfect and we're sinful. And I'm so glad that you understand the difference between the love of God and the imperfect church. I do believe the church is the hope of the world, but don't go to church to find your God. I mean, is not. God is in the church, but the church is not all encompassing. You don't go to church on
Yeah.
Sunday morning just to see God. God is
Mhm.
everywhere. God is every day. He is all powerful,
Yeah.
omnipotent. I mean, He is everywhere. And so I think it's really good that the church is different from God.
Yeah.
And so I
Yeah.
think that's really good advice.
I think I experienced such diverse versions of Christianity, from being raised ultra conservative to later being involved with ultra charismatic,
Yeah,
that I'm like, I think you guys like kind of know who God is, but the
yeah,
God I've experienced is a little bit different than
yeah,
everyone is talking to me about. And he's not a tame God, and he's all powerful, but he's not all controlling
yeah,
because he doesn't want to control us. He wants to empower us, and so sometimes bad things happen
yep,
because he's not about controlling people. He's
yeah,
about empowering people. And some people choose to not walk in their calling and in
yeah,
their destiny that he's placed on their life. And he's not going to use you like a pawn and force you to
yep,
do things. However, he will redeem those areas where people have not um, done their best in your life,
Yeah.
That's just a guarantee that something better is coming your way.
Yeah.
So maybe you didn't have a good father growing up, but now you have an understanding of what a bad dad looks like, so that you can be an incredible father to your children,
Yep.
maybe,
So
you know,
good.
and maybe you wouldn't have had that trajectory if your father hadn't failed you.
Yeah. That is
I don't
so
know.
good. That is so good. And I think it's really good that to say that you're at a charismatic church now, and you've not given up on the church, because you realize that the church is an imperfect place
Mm-hmm.
with people that really do want to help, but oftentimes
Yeah.
they hurt, but they're not God. They're not God, and
Mm-mm.
God is.
Mm-mm.
And I think every church gets a little bit of it right, but really, I think the only way you're going to really get it right is if you have that direct connection with God through Jesus.
Yeah. Yeah.
So tell us about what you're doing now. Where are you at now?
So now I work basically for DCF, but I work in foster care,
What's
and I
DCF?
support Department of Children and Families.
Okay, all right. Just for people
So
that don't
a
know.
lot of people don't like us because they think we come in and take children, but
Mm-hmm.
it's really our goal here in Florida. We're a reunification state, so
Mm-hmm.
we really love reunifying families and strengthening excuse me, strengthening the family unit. So however we can support a family to where children don't have to be removed,
Mm-hmm.
that's what we want to do.
Yeah.
So I work with families and make sure they're all having healthy interactions together, and kind of help coach parents how to be healthy parents. And then also I am a C-section specialist, so I specialize in helping children who are at high risk to be or have been victims of sex trafficking.
That's
Um,
amazing.
and a lot of times, unfortunately, that is through their parents. So in those situations, I'm able to come alongside these kids and say, "Hey, I've been in that situation. I know what that looks like. I know how that ends. It's not good. So let me help you break this cycle now while you're a kid,
Yeah.
so you don't have to deal with it the rest of your adult life."
Yep.
So I'm actually in the middle of a couple cases right now.
Wow. Wow. So back to kind of you. Do you go to counseling now? Was there counseling involved to kind of get you better? Do you recommend a psychiatrist as well? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I have been screened by psychiatrists, but I've never actually followed through with any sort of
Okay.
medication at this point. My mother is on medication, my father's on medication, so I'm open to medication if medication is what individuals need to help them
Mm-hmm.
get healthy. I'm not particularly wanting to support be on medication as a lifestyle.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think there's a lot of things you can do that a lot of people don't do
Yeah.
to clear your mind, which is a lot of that has to do with your diet, nutrition,
Yeah.
exercise, meditation, prayer in the morning, having structure,
Yeah.
journaling, a lot of that stuff. And if you haven't implemented that stuff and you're seeking out, a pill, then I would suggest to put a pause on that and
Yeah.
maybe put that into your life. And if you're still struggling, then continue to seek out psychiatric.
Yeah.
Again, I am not a counselor. I am not a
Yeah.
therapist. So follow your doctor's orders, yada, yada, yada.
Yeah.
But I do go see a therapist. He specializes in resolving PTSD.
Oh, wow.
So he can resolve PTSD basically within 3 sessions.
Wow.
So at this point, we're just in maintenance mode to where, I'll just be going about life. And, this is my first time being married, my last time being married.
Yeah.
And so I'm in uncharted waters. I didn't expect to live this long.
Yeah.
I didn't expect to make it this far. I didn't expect to find someone who would accept me in my past and all my little quirks, that come with that,
Yeah.
and walk through this life with me.
Wow.
So now that I'm here and now that I'm learning to, be in a marriage and be a good wife and what that looks like and being a partner, things do come up every once in a while. So
Yeah.
I believe in continued therapy before something bad happens. You should be in therapy continually, even if things are good,
Yeah.
because then you're able to build a foundation to when you're in a situation and things get bad, that it doesn't escalate,
Right.
but you
Right.
have the tools to have that conversation. Because, we're, like you said, we're all very human, and we all have very human situations and human
Yeah,
moments.
yeah,
So, like, even, if, like, my partner, like, even if he didn't have anything super traumatic happen, he's still gonna have some, he still might have some triggers or something
right.
like that. So, in my opinion, everybody needs therapy. It's so
I
healthy
agree.
to have one. I am like 100% go to therapy no matter what, all the
Yeah.
time, every month.
So, and I think it's funny you mentioned, there are some things that you can do to replace medicine that throughout your day to kind of make your day go better and make your life go better. And I would recommend that maybe we can talk about some of those now. And if you are taking, any kind of medication, start practicing some of the things she's going to talk about, and then maybe talk to your doctor about what it looks like to come off some of those. Because I know for me personally, I've noticed that medication just blankets bigger issues. And sometimes there is a chemical imbalance in your brain and you need medication, that's fine. But I think a lot of the stuff we do in America is we put band aids on all this stuff. And so, could you tell us a little bit about your daily routine when it comes to meditation and what it looks like for you to kind of work on your mental health?
Sure. So, in a perfect world, when the day goes the way, if I don't get like called out in the morning or something like that for work,
Yeah.
I usually, when we're not in quarantine, I usually wake up and go to the gym first thing in the
Yeah.
morning. So, excuse me, I usually get about 2 hours at the gym in, because that's always been a safe haven for me. And
Yeah.
since I've been an athlete, it feels like I can control me on a good day.
Yeah.
Like, that's the only thing you can control, is you on a good day. So the first thing I do is get a win in. So I get a win in by going and doing this thing, controlling my body for
Yes.
two
That's
hours,
great.
and making this investment in me. And so I've already started off the day with a win at that point.
Yeah.
And then moving forward, just making sure I'm drinking water. Usually around lunch is when I do kind of like a meditation
Yeah.
period, like, because usually I have to jump straight into the day. It's usually high stress cases, so by lunchtime I need a break.
Yeah.
And that can look like me I usually like go for a walk around the office, outside.
Yeah.
It's amazing what fresh air and sunlight can do
Yeah.
for your mood.
Seriously.
And even if you don't feel like it, because it gets hot here, so
Yeah.
even if you don't feel like it, like going and doing and moving and breathing some fresh air is really important.
Yeah.
I also have a gratitude journal I
Oh,
keep.
it's so
So
important.
every day I wake
So
up and
good.
write. And it could be in the morning, it could be at lunchtime, but it's by lunchtime. I've drank a half gallon of water, I've
Yeah.
exercised for 2 hours, and I've written in my gratitude journal. So
That's great.
that's usually the goals there.
That's great.
Um, and then I've noticed too, like, the less processed food and the more whole food and
Mm.
live food I eat, the better I feel about myself. Like, if you eat like crap, you're kind of like,
Yeah.
oh, I eat like
Yeah.
crap today, and you're
Yeah.
a little slow. And
Yeah.
then, like, for someone who struggles with their self-image, and for someone who has been performance driven, and how I look has been something
Mhm.
that has driven my worth for a long time, it's just really important for me to not let anything in that area
Yeah.
in my life.
Yeah.
So it's like, having a clean diet is really important, because if I don't, then that opens the door to let condemnation
Mm.
and self-worth issues kind of
Yeah.
creep back in.
That's
So
good.
that's just an area I have to be really tight on. And you will know those areas where,
Yeah.
you need to be tight on. And so for
Yeah.
me, that's the areas. And then also at night, both my husband and I try to not be on our phones at night
That's
when we're
smart.
together. And then when I go to bed, I practice visualization. So I start visualizing, like, a particular dream, like maybe I'm really focusing on a promotion, or really focusing on a different aspect of my life, and I
Yeah.
imagine it in detail. And then I also imagine how the next day would go in detail in a perfect world, and like me at my most healthiest, how I'd react to
Wow.
situations. So
That's really
I
good.
go through that in my mind, and then I fall asleep doing that.
Yeah. That's a great exercise. I think
Hmm.
that's great for anybody. The exercise in the morning, couple hours of exercise, and then drink lots of water. Don't eat processed foods. Meditate at noon. Maybe you can meditate in the morning too. Whatever, just kind of whatever works for your schedule.
Yep.
And And then I like that visual
Visualization.
visualization at night. I think that's awesome. I think if I did that, just me personally, I would get so excited I probably wouldn't be able to fall asleep. I don't know. Do you ever run into that? Like you're just like, oh,
No,
perfect
like
world,
if
this would be
anything,
great. Like,
it brings like a lot of peace over
yeah,
it. And I know that, I look at it with anticipation and not expectation,
yeah.
because expectation means you're holding on to a very
Wow.
like rigid view of anything, but anticipation of good things are going to come
Yeah,
my way. I'm going to have access to grace and to peace and to
yeah.
joy no matter what time, no matter what
Come
happens.
on.
Because like in my work, like things can escalate really quickly, or really bad things can happen
Yeah,
all of a sudden. And so I having that access to God and having that access to the presence
yeah.
is the only way I've been in social work for,
That's
how long
amazing.
I've been in social work.
That's
So
amazing.
um, I just really rely heavily on the presence and heavily on
Yeah.
grace. And
Mm,
if that's not something you have in your life, then I would encourage you to figure out what
yeah.
your life would look like with it,
Yeah.
because it's a game changer.
Yeah, and if you're wondering what your life would look like with the grace of God and what a game changer it is, reach out to our ministry. Please reach out to us through a message on here. The whole reason we do these is to encourage and inspire you and hopefully open you up to the grace and the mercy that is available through the love of God. And so you're not bothering us, you're actually giving us an opportunity. So don't rob us of a blessing. Reach out to us so we can tell you about how good God's grace is. We'd love to tell you about that. And just got a couple more questions for you here, Amanda. Um,
Yeah. I mean, and that's not to say I don't have bad days,
yeah,
because I
yeah.
do have bad
I'm
days.
glad you
Like,
mentioned
let's
that.
be real.
Yeah.
Like, I'll have like 4 good days, and then I'll have like 3 pretty rough
Yeah,
days.
yeah.
And on those days, like, you just can't get your peace, and you're just
Mm,
pissed off, or
yep,
hormones or whatever.
yeah,
You just cannot, it just is not working. And you just got to take those days moment by
yeah,
moment. Like, there's going to be bad days, and that's okay.
yeah,
Like, that doesn't say
yeah.
you're messed up or you're wrong or
Right,
like God hates you. It's
right.
called life. There's
Yep.
ups and downs. And so, like, especially like panic attacks, if I start having a panic attack or something, I always use a grounding technique of where I sit and I'm like, all right, I can feel my hair is in a ponytail. It's in a high ponytail. I feel the band in my hair. I
Yeah.
can feel these earbuds in my
Mm,
ear, and start just reaching out with your
yep.
senses. And it really brings you back to
That's
reality instead of
amazing.
that moment of PTSD or that moment of anxiety of like, okay, what's happening right now? Is
Yeah,
anybody hurting me right now?
yeah,
No. Am I making a bad choice right now?
yeah,
No. Is anything bad happening right now? No. And so once you're able to like bring you back down to this moment, then you go, oh, thank you,
yeah.
God, that nothing bad's happening right now.
That's so
So
great.
it goes from like, okay, what's the truth? And then to gratitude. And now you're moved into this where you're releasing serotonin in your own body by
Right.
expressing gratefulness. So now you're like getting yourself back out of that moment.
Yeah, that is amazing. And I think a few of the techniques that you've shared, I think people just listening could probably practice those. But a lot of the stuff that she's sharing is probably stuff that, she's gone out to search out to find.
Mhm.
You're going to find what you're looking for, whether it's, I always recommend go the counseling road first and see if you can find some meditations and some exercises to kind of help yourself out of that stuff. And then if you find that it's chemical, go the medication route. But I think that, man, some of the stuff she's sharing should really be encouraging you to say that, hey, maybe some of these panic attacks I can just work my way out of. I can ground myself, I can get myself right, and I don't need to pop that Xanax or whatever it is you're popping to get you out of that.
Mhm.
That's so good. Thank you for sharing that. And I think that I've heard you mention gratitude quite a few times, and that's one thing that we always share, that gratitude is a change factor. It really is. And I'm grateful for those good days that I have, but I still know that I am going to have those bad days, and I've got to take the good with
Mhm.
the bad. And one scripture, it's kind of like my life verse that I always share, that Paul said, I asked the Lord 3 times to remove the thorn from my side. He said, still God said that my grace is sufficient, my power is made great in your weakness. So some of those bad days sometimes I can take to say, hey, say, man, your power is going to be made great today, God, because I'm weak. I can't do this today. I'm going to have to float on your grace and your mercy. I'm going to let this thorn stay in my side because it reminds me that I have to rely on you for my grace and for my mercy on those days when I don't feel you, when I can't, when I can't feel the power of God. I have to trust that your grace
Hmm.
is sufficient to get me through this. And I'm sure you could agree with that,
Yeah.
his grace is so sufficient to get you through the hard days and the panic attacks and everything that comes with PTSD and all that stuff. And so I would ask you, do you think that everything in your life happened for a reason? All the bad things, all the good stuff.
I think it's a mix of um, like God didn't intend for bad
Right.
things to happen to me because he's a good father. He only gives good gifts. He's a
Right.
good God.
Right.
So he wasn't like, oh, these trials, oh, this is what Amanda gets.
Yeah.
Sorry, girl. I think people and myself made choices and my life went a certain direction.
Hmm.
And I think God definitely redeemed the bad choices
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah.
I think my life could have looked differently if I would have had different tools, if people around me would have made different choices, and if I would have made different choices.
Yeah.
But this is what happened.
Yeah.
And now I don't regret any of this. I don't wish anything different because, like I told you, my past serves me.
Yeah.
And it makes me so good at my job.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
able to love on these kids and relate to them in a way that a lot of people would never be able
Yeah.
to. And so it makes me really powerful, actually.
Yeah.
And I'm super grateful for my story. Obviously, like in the middle of a panic attack, I would be like, I don't know
Yeah.
about this.
Yeah. I
But
hear you on that.
definitely, like when I look back, so much greater good has come out of it than
Mm.
bad that it's just like,
Yeah.
and that's God.
So you would agree that you wouldn't change anything?
No, I
Yeah.
definitely not.
With all the horror and the horrific stuff that happened in my past too, I think I would agree that I wouldn't change anything because I think it makes me good at my job. The Hope Project is a ministry for the marginalized, the people who have kind of been forgotten, the drug addicts and alcoholics, and the people that are in the sex trafficking and all that stuff, and we get to reach those people, and I've just been there. Like you ever see some of those people and they look at you like you could never know what I'm going through, and I'm like, I've been where you are. I
Yep.
know what it looks like to be at the bottom, and I know what it looks like to have God's grace bring you out of that and live a purposeful, free life. And so I think that's why I'm so encouraged to have your friendship now because we're more than conquerors. We are
Hmm.
overcomers.
Hmm.
Not because of anything we did, but because of something Jesus did 2,000 years ago on a cross. And he
Yeah.
went and we're celebrating Easter right now, and it's
Hmm.
right around that time, and I think it's such a great time to have an overcomer story because ultimately we get to celebrate the biggest overcomer story. Jesus overcame death.
Yeah.
Was raised from the grave, so that we could have the kingdom of heaven right now inside of us. We can have the kingdom of
Preach.
heaven here, and that so we could have eternal life and live with Him in heaven someday. But you and I are both stories of God's grace and God's mercy, and we literally have almost been to death and been brought back to life. I always
Yeah.
tell people that Jesus doesn't make bad people good; He makes dead people alive.
Yeah.
And
And I actually committed suicide right before I left, and I actually died.
mm,
And they brought me back. So it's like
wow,
literal, like
mm,
he totally raised me from the dead and gave me a completely new life.
wow.
And yeah, everything you're just saying, right on, right on.
Oh man. Well, I am so thankful for your friendship. I'm so thankful for what you're doing, for the cause of sex trafficking and labor trafficking.
Hmm.
It's so amazing to see someone that's not just an overcomer, but is now giving back and is fighting this evil that is in our world. And I'm just so thankful for what you're doing. Again, I'm thankful for your friendship. I'm thankful you shared your story today because I'm just believing somebody's watching this today that is kind of downtrodden, is feeling marginalized, like people have forgotten them, and maybe you are in a trap house or you're somewhere watching this on Facebook or YouTube or whatever, And I want you to know that you're not alone. You know, people have gone through what you're going through and probably worse, and they have come up out of it. They've overcome it, and now they are world changers. And so, if you think you can't get out of what you're going through, take a look at Amanda. Take a look at her life. Take a look at what God has done through her, and just know that He can do it through you. If He can do it through a screw up like me, He can do it through somebody like you. You can be an overcomer. And the first step is reaching out to somebody and saying, hey, I need help. So I want to encourage you today, if you're watching this today and anything you've heard today resonates with you, I want you to reach out to the Hope Project. Don't even think about it. Just do it and reach out and just type 3 words, I need help. It's all we want to hear from you. As soon as you type that, we're gonna call you. We're gonna reach out to you. We're gonna do whatever it is. We're not gonna bombard you. We're gonna reach out to you in a very confidential way, and we're gonna walk with you through whatever it is that you're going through, because we believe that you are a future overcomer and world changer. Like, if God can do it through me and Amanda, He can do it through you. So if you can't believe in yourself, believe in what God can do through you. So I'm super excited to see the fruit from this talk today, this real raw conversation. I thank you so much for just being just real about your struggles and real about what you're doing now, and I just believe this is going to bless somebody. It's going to encourage somebody, and we're going to see a lot of fruit from it. So, man, until next time, thank you so much for joining us for this real raw conversation. Thank you, Amanda. So good to have you.
It's my pleasure.
Yeah, and we will see you guys next time. Thanks so much.